Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Williams. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Williams. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Williams, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today, as usual. You know, I have a video that I'm going to want to show you guys also of something that is very disconcerting with the news. And you know what? They even admit it. They even admitted it. But, you know, again, we're going to have a good show. The first thing that I ask all of you that are watching right now is to please go ahead and remember that we ask you to share this show on your wall right away. Why do we need you to do that? Because of Facebook algorithms. Once again, the Facebook algorithms has changed, and now it's even require some more independence from the different listeners and so forth of your program. So what I want to ask you guys again is those of you who are just joining the show right now to please go ahead and share this show on your wall. Absent sharing, what we have is much less viewership of the show, and without you, there ain't no show. Remember, this is your program. Remember, you are the one that's going to out there assisting in making a change, assisting in ensuring that we get the change that we want. And you know what, folks? It's not going to happen by accident. It's not going to happen by mistake. It is something that we're going to have to actively go out there and accomplish. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, well, somebody else is going to do it. No, and no. The only way we're going to get these changes that we're looking for from a political standpoint, and not only from a political standpoint, but also from a social standpoint, is if we go out there and if we are the ones that are actually going to do the work. And that goes also with ensuring that we share progressive programming, because progressive, you know, a lot of people talk about, oh, well, we have liberal stations. Here is the truth. There ain't no liberal stations out there. If a station is controlled by the corporatocracy, it cannot possibly be a liberal station. It cannot be a progressive station. If a station is using commercials in which you have agents that come out and purchase commercials on that station, that cannot be a progressive station, because they cannot tell you except what is allowed to tell you to ensure that they don't use that commercial. Some people will say, well, what about those sites that have ads on them? Passive ads are a different thing, right? Because in that regards, folks don't have control as far as what you're going to put on your sites or whatever. But when it comes to media, radio, otherwise, it is if the particular radio station or TV station has commercials that people externally come out and purchase, they cannot be progressive. So we are the only option left, the independent media. We're the only ones that can make that change. So folks, please, if you're just joining us, please be sure to share this on your wall. Please be sure to share this on your wall. It is imperative that we do so. So what is today's program going to be about? Today's program is going to be about quite a bit of stuff, really. But specifically, as you know, we just had some elections that went went forth, and what we have is a narrative out there telling people that, oh, somehow the progressives didn't get the job done. Somehow the country isn't as progressive as many progressives would want you to believe. Somehow, guess what? Things didn't work the way we expected them to work, to which I tell you, folks, that is hogwash, and hogwash. But we're only going to let the truth be known if we go out there and spread the truth as it really is. So folks, if you're just joining us, please be sure to go ahead and spread this word, spread this by sharing this stuff, sharing this program on your wall, and that's the way we're going to make a difference. Okay, we're going to get into the program right away, and let me make sure that I think we've shared all the things that we need to share so far. But anyhow, the title of the program today is gonna be or is the liberal media is trying to depress progressives, but the truth will prevail, and that is very important. We had Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez going around the country helping other candidates, and they tried to spin Alexandria Cortez as a failure. They tried to spin what she accomplished as a failure. They tried to say that Tuesday was a failure. Folks, that is not true. If you read the blog of the week that we're going to talk about today, we can categorically tell you that that is not true. Again, if you're just joining us, please go ahead and share the program. Anyhow, the subtitle of the show: if one read the liberal and other establishment papers the day after the last primaries, one would think progressives had a huge failure. That is not true. Instead of the success that they've had, our successes didn't begin with if folks, if you're just getting here, please go ahead and share the program on your wall. Very important. Based on the Facebook algorithms, please share the program on your wall. Anyhow, if you're just joining us, they try to make it seem as if Tuesday was a failure. Folks, it was not a failure. Progressives had a success. Whether their particular insurgent candidate won or not, they were very successful. Anyhow, do not be fooled by the reports that would have you believe that somehow Democrats are dismissing progressives and their insurgent candidates. When insurgent candidates did not win, guess what was the real reason the establishment candidate won? I'm going to explain that later. Anyone who attended Netroots 2018 can answer that question. It is clear that the Democratic Party is a new party. The question is whether the establishment will find a way to do what Bill Clinton did to it again. We cannot allow that to happen. It is clear progressive activists are serious this time around and will not allow anything to derail them, not even the Democratic Party. And again, notice I said, not even the Democratic Party. What I really should have said, not even the Democratic Party establishment, the portion that is owned due to the corporatocracy, that is. But before I get started with the blog of the week, I want to show you guys something that is really, really wrong with what's happening in America today. I'm going to play a video, and this video is of Stephanie Ruhle. I love Stephanie Ruhle because she's a very good reporter, and what she does is get into the details of things. But do remember that the folks that you see in front of the cameras aren't the ones who necessarily tell what the news is going to be of the day or who puts the news on. Yes, they have some leeway, but ultimately the producers put that on, and most of the times they put that on with the expectation that it's going to bring more eyeballs. So what happens then is, instead of trying to make real news eyeball worthy, what they do is they give you a whole lot of crap that gets to the animal part of your brain and have you just reacting. Here's Stephanie Ruhle, and then I'm going to talk about this after it plays.
But then let's talk about a different American experiment, one that works for the president. It's called Distract and Enrage. This morning, the president took to Twitter just before 9 a.m. to again go after NFL players. When, if you think about the news cycle, what could we have been focusing on today? That a judge specifically called out the Trump administration, Kirstjen Nielsen, Jeff Sessions, about the zero tolerance policy in the inhumane treatment of migrant children. We could have been starting the day talking about Melania Trump, whose parents yesterday were made U.S. citizens, and they were able to use the family-based migration system, the system the president rails against, calling it chain migration. We could have talked about a congressman who's been arrested for insider trading. We could have led the show about Paul Manafort, the president's former campaign manager, who is now possibly facing life imprisonment for tax fraud. We could have gone after Wilbur Ross and the bombshell story that came out this week about the conflicts of interest. But nope, we didn't talk about any of those things, or the fact that this is the one-year anniversary of Charlottesville, which many Republicans consider the lowest point in the president's administration. When, remember, he looked at those riots and said, blame is on many, many sides. When, remember, a peace protester, Heather Heyer, was killed. So talk about this, Jonathan. The president has now turned and said, look, the NFL, those players, those boys who have the privilege of making millions of dollars. And here's the thing, that's a winning distraction for him.
Okay, so what's important about that? What's important about that? Notice Stephanie Ruhle realizes that Donald Trump is the master at distraction. Anytime there's anything of importance happening, he puts out a tweet, In this case, he puts out a tweet about the NFL guys. He puts out a tweet about something stupid that he knows all the reporting, all the channels, all the ridiculous channels are going to pick up on. Those producers are going to pick that up and say, oh, Donald Trump had a tweet about this. Donald Trump had a tweet about that. Notice that Stephanie Rule, based on what you just saw, she knew many of the important headings that should have been played that day, or today to be specific. She knew we should have been talking about many other issues, and there's another one that she hadn't mentioned. Specifically, she didn't mention the one about healthcare and what's going to happen in a couple months when people get their bill and see that the healthcare disaster that Donald Trump has created is going to immediately hit many of these people who least expect. The people that Trump said he was going to help, they're going to be attacked by prices they cannot afford for healthcare. And then he has a backup plan where he's going to then offer them the opportunity to buy some cheap stuff. And when they purchase that cheap stuff, right, they can purchase that cheap stuff that will not be able to cover them for real healthcare expenses. Folks, the country is falling to hell. There's a whole lot happening. You know, they promote that the job market looks great. Of course, it means many people have 2 and 3 jobs. They promote that the stock market is doing great. Of course, it's only for those people who have a lot of capital. They promote all these things that are going well. But the problem is we don't have reporting to tell Americans the truth. So individual Americans are feeling their pain. But when they hear this good news that's on TV, they don't want to tell their neighbor, hey, I'm having it hard. How comes everybody else is doing fine? Because they think their neighbor is doing fine. So America is in a catch-22 situation that it's called suffering in silence. And suffering in silence mean that a lot of people are hurting right now, but because they're hearing about how great this economy is, and they see Peter and Paul around the street and Amy and Mary, you know, maybe overspending or credit card spending or whatever, they believe things are okay because they're too ashamed to say, well, man, how comes you can do that and I can't? The reality is the bubble is going to eventually bust. It will eventually burst. The bubble will. Because as it turns out, people are having it quite and very, very hard. The vast majority of Americans, a report just came out recently, I didn't put it in the blog, that said 80% of Americans are a paycheck away from poverty, a paycheck away from being able to do anything. That's 80% of Americans. That's the vast majority of Americans. That's over 100 and something million, over 200 million people. Think about that, people. Think about that. So when you hear about the people in trouble, when you hear about the people having a hard time, it is true. And when you hear the news, all the good news that they're telling you this good news with the expectation that when you go to the polls and vote, you will be voting not for what is affecting you, for what you hope will be for you. But the fact of the matter is they're doing absolutely nothing for what is going to be something for you. And as Stephanie Rule just pointed out, with the media continuously preoccupied with the distractions that Donald Trump puts out there, and that's, if you take a look at the blogs that I'm doing recently, you don't see me writing a whole lot about Russia. You don't see me writing a whole lot about all the women that are suing Donald Trump. You don't see me writing about any of those things. You see me writing about things like healthcare. What is going to happen when healthcare hits? You see me writing about, in fact, my stilt on that's coming out on Daily Kos on the front page on Sunday is going to talk about the inhumanity of the current American economy. The inhumanity of the current American economy. It's going to be on the front page at Daily Kos on Sunday, and we will discuss that on Politics Done Right on Monday. Right now, the article is quarantined for Daily Kos only, so we can't do much about it. But it's so important, folks, for us to understand the distractions. It is very important for us to note what Stephanie Rule noted there, and that is we are being distracted to forget and not see what is really happening in the country. And I sure hope that with programs like Politics Done Right, with programs like the Young Turks, with programs like the Majority Report, and all these other programs out there, that you will give these programs a chance, that you will go ahead and promote these programs, that you will go ahead and subscribe to these programs to make sure that the truth can go out to a whole bunch of folk who are right now just at the whim of these companies. MSNBC, Stephanie Rule would love to do right. She would love to be covering the right stories, but her producer won't let her. When they put that teleprompter up there, they decide what stories are going to be there. And you know what they want? They want eyeballs. They don't want a whole bunch of frustrated people. They want a bunch of eyeballs with people that are just ready and lucky to go buy some products that they're advertising. And that's what it's all about. That's the amount of disrespect that they show for the American people. That is the amount of disrespect all the standard mainstream news, the mainstream media gives to you. But you still go to cable, right? You still own cable, and you still purchase cable at several $100s sometimes a month. Some of you $100 a month. Well, folks, invest in something like Politics Done Right and the TYT and these other independent news media so that you can be informed with the reality. We're going to talk about the progressive things right now, but let me just do a quick pick here and tell you. Please go to patreon.com. The link is also on the inside of the video at Patreon, patreon.com/politics done right. That is Patreon, patreon.com/politics done right. If you're listening on a podcast, again, that is P as in person, patreon.com/politics done right. It should be also in the heading for the video, the link to patreon.com to support programs, to support independent media, to support Politics Done Right. Now, folks, we're going to go to you know what. We are going to go to you know what. Do you know what time it is? But do you really know what time it is?
It's time for the weekly blog post.
Well, thank you so kindly for sticking around for the weekly blog post. Before I start, the aim again is to have you share our show in real time. Of course, it's going to be available by podcast on iTunes and everywhere else. It'll be, it'll get most of its viewership in podcast form. But I would love to get more live viewers so that we can have more interaction, so that people would call. Remember, this is a call-in show. Give us a call at 646-716-5812. Again, that number is 646-716-5812. Okay, folks, here is the blog of the week. It says, disregard the corporate mainstream media. Progressives won big recently. Do not fall for the crap that you hear on TV, and let me explain why. The corporatist mainstream media needed to create a narrative, to create the illusion that the progressive move of within the Democratic Party did not have either lasting traction or stay in power. Do not believe it. Here is, folks, the reality. But first, the liberal Washington Post article, and I put liberal in quotations because you always have to wonder if these guys are liberal based on the news that they're putting out there. So let's go. The liberal Washington Post article titled, Democratic Party's Liberal Insurgents Hits a Wall in Midwest Primaries, tried to make a caricature of the candidate supported by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders. Now, this is what they said. The Democratic Party's left-wing insurgency found its limits on Tuesday night, with voters favoring establishment candidates over more liberal challengers in almost every closely watched race across several states. Notice how they qualified that. This is how they make themselves tell the truth, even though in reality, they are lying if one looks at it in the aggregate. This is what they said. It says, the Democratic left-wing party's insurgency found its limit Tuesday night, with voters favoring establishment candidates over more liberal challengers. But in what races are they talking about? In every closely watched race across several states. Notice what they said. They had to qualify that. In closely watched races. What happened to the races that were not closely watched? Guess what, folks? If you go down the line from county commissioner to city council to state rep and all these guys, these are also representatives of government, right? And we know that the most important representatives of government for 2018 is going to be at the state level. Why? Because guess what's coming up in 2020? Redistricting. So what we have to do is make sure that we have progressives elected from the lowest level of state government to the highest, meaning the Senate and the House and the governorships of state government. Why? Because that is the way we are going to control redistricting and make sure that the shenanigans that the Republicans did to hold on to a majority in Congress, even though they are a minority party, does not occur again. But what did these guys say? What did the Washington Post say to make it seem like progressives had a bad night? They said, for closely watched races, meaning the races they chose to watch. All right? In Michigan, former state senator Gretchen Whitmer easily won the Democratic nomination for governor over Abdul El Sayed, a doctor backed by Senator Bernie Sanders, who was vying to become the country's first Muslim governor. In suburban House districts across the Midwest, left-wing candidates lost to Democrats backed by party leaders, abortion rights groups, and labor unions. Okay. You mean by labor unions and abortion rights groups? I thought that was the left wing. Oh, wow. Okay. And St. Louis, where party giant slayer Alexandria OcasioCortez traveled to help another young insurgent candidate topple an incumbent Rep. William Lacey Clay, cruised to an easy primary win over challenger Cori Bush. Okay. So they highlight some people that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez supported, and they lost. What about all of those that she supported that won? And I don't have it with me right now, but there's immediately after somebody quoted the Washington Post, Our Revolution sent out a tweet that pointed out all the folks that actually won that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez supported. So you cannot, when we talk about a purchased media, and do remember as well, the Washington Post has to have ads, and those ads have to come from people who pay them specifically. Now, if you go to egbertowillies.com for the few ads that you see, the ads that you see on that site, I don't ask for the ads. They just throw them there. Some aggregator puts them up there. I have no control. And guess what? So that means they don't have any control either. But in these guys, those guys that actually have departments that go out, solicit, and buy ads, that means that somebody has to control them. That means they are owed to those people. We're not. Independent media is not. That is why we try to have several streams of flow so that we are not dependent on any one entity. We have subscriptions, we have things like where these guys place banners on our sites. And you know what? They have no say, because guess what? We don't even know who's putting it for all practical purposes. So anyhow, folks, it is important for you to understand what the Washington Post did there to make it seem like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders and others were not successful from the progressive movement. They just selected a few races. Those few races, some of them were lost. And then they said, oh, there's a stop on the progressive movement. Hell no. Look down the ballot. Understand what is going on, folks. And here's it. This is the Washington Post that everybody tells you. Believe it. Believe what the Washington Post is telling you. Believe what MSNBC is telling you. Believe what CNN is telling you. These are the progressive sites, right? But still yet, some of the same shenanigans that we see on the right to disparage the progressive side of the democratic movement, we get that. But this is a call out. This is the call out. And that is why we need independent media, folks. Because that is, we're owed to nothing to nobody. Now, continuing with the article. And then there is the American conservative article titled, "The Progressive Bark is Worse Than Their Bite." And that echoes a similar tone. And that part is supposedly a conservative magazine, right? And here's what they say. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the new poster child for the progressive movement, who shocked the nation by clobbering a 10-term incumbent in her New York area district Democratic primary, has been a woman on a mission. While she is still technically one of hundreds of congressional candidates who need to run In November, Ocasio-Cortez has lately spent more time on the trail for progressives in other parts of the country. While the 28-year-old political newcomer insists she isn't the spokeswoman of the Democratic Party's ascendant grassroots progressive wing, she has acted as though she is. Congressional candidates usually don't endorse insurgents against establishment Democrats. After all, who wants to ruffle the establishment feathers when you have to work them if the voters send you to Washington? Yet, Ocasio-Cortez has been crazy enough to do just that. Backing challengers to sit in Democratic incumbent in Florida, Massachusetts, Delaware, and Maryland. Endorsing is one thing, but getting your endorsements across the finish line is very different. The former is painless, the latter impossible if registered Democrats are uncomfortable with the candidate or message. Ocasio-Cortez and her mentor, Bernie Sanders, learned this the hard way during weeks' volley of Democratic primaries. The progressive and democratic socialists may be loud and fired up, but they haven't yet had much success at winning against the establishment wing of their party. Now, all I have to say is, Alexandria OcasioCortez, don't tell us that knocking off the biggest cheese, the person that was going to be Speaker of the House if and when the Democrats take over the House in 2018, knocking him off isn't successful? Knocking people off throughout state races isn't successful? Come on, folks. You understand what's going on here. You have the left side of the establishment and the right side of the establishment coalescing on the same talking point, that the progressive movement is being stalled or unsuccessful. When I talk to you guys, I tell you, and we're not done with the blog of the week, but I need to get into a little bit of my soliloquy here again to say something that is so important, folks. By the way, if you're just joining us, folks, please share us on your wall. Please share us on your page, Twitter, Tumblr, and everything else, because that we have to get the truth out. We have to get the truth out. When you see a conservative paper and a liberal paper, and notice conservative in quote, liberal in quote, getting together on the same talking point, that the establishment, that the progressive movement has stalled. But not only that, when you have the conservative party saying, or the conservative journal saying that, hey, how silly is this woman who is going to ruffle the feathers of the status quo people in Congress? Well, what the hell? That is what we want to do. That is what we want to do. They have been unsuccessful so far. And I'm going to continue with some of that. But the reality is, trying to play at the center, Democrats trying the center-right tactic under Bill Clinton failed. Trying to play the center under Obama failed. We failed to get policies that ultimately took the poor and the middle class ahead. And this is not to disparage President Obama at all. I mean, the Affordable Care Act helped, and a few other programs helped, but it did not reverse what is implicitly wrong with our economy. And I addressed some of that, not in detail, but some of that on my Daily Kos Sunday article. There are systemic problems within our economy that lends itself to what? Income disparity. There's nothing around it. It's cooked into our into our economics. And the only way to do that is some sort of, if you don't want to set the laws up correctly, the only other choice is redistribution. But here's the deal. There is a systemic problem in our economy that tells most of you Americans, most of you that are listening to my voice right now, you will not get ahead in this economy. It is predetermined that just a select few can make it. Who are the select few? I don't know. Who are the select few? They will be the chosen. As an example, if you're an engineer, there are tons of engineering jobs, but there are more engineers, and somebody will choose which engineers will get into office and get the right kind of pay that makes them want to continue to guard this. We have a systemic problem in our economy that needs fixing. And until we get to the point where we fix it, And I have ideas, but this requires a whole bunch of economists getting together who are not tainted by what has to be, as if our economy was ordained by God. We have to get to the point where people can say, let's see how things have been working, how things have worked, how things can work, and let's do it. And if for some reason pieces of what we do are unsuccessful, we're not fearful to say, well, this didn't work, we try this. We're not tied to an ideology, we're tied to what works. Until we get there, you are relegated. The vast majority of people who will listen to this live and on podcast, you are relegated to ultimately what I call a new form of indentured servitude, a new form of slavery. And the thing about it, right? It's not even race-based now. It's just, and not race class-based. I mean, a lot of people are going to be talking about how the racial things had impact on the system, etc. All of that is true. But the systemic problem that we have right now is going to affect people across the board, and race has to be injected into the system for people to take their eyes off of the ball. If we put all those things, all the distractions that, remember what I played earlier in the show, if you put all those distractions on, what happens with all those distractions? What those distractions do for you is it makes you not look at where the problem really is. It is again, for those that are just coming on, I ask you to share, share this program on your wall, share this program everywhere. The problem why we are in the situation today isn't your fault, isn't the fault of these independent politicians. It is the fault of the economic system. It is by design. It is by design. And where in the past we could extract from a few who couldn't talk a whole lot, we could extract from those indigents, we could extract from those others. But as we pilfer them to the max, what do you think had to happen? The pilfering had to be then broad-based. And now we have broad-based pilfering in America done by our economic system. That is what we're fighting, folks. That is what I'm begging to get across to people right now. That is what I'm hoping with independent programs that can actually tell you the truth. That is not dependent on, oh, we're going to upset the corporatocracy who needs this system to maintain. If they want growth, I'm going to give you one quick formula before I finish this blog of the week. But here's the deal. If the American economy is growing, let's say now at 3.5%, but the wealthy, if their personal economies are growing at 7, 10, 15%, there's only one economy. If yours is growing at 3.5% and theirs at 7%, or rather the total economy is growing at 3.5% and theirs at 7 point something or more percent, they have to get their monies, their growth from somewhere. And since it's one economy, that 7% is taking all of that 3.5%. And if you doubt it, the reality is when you see that wages haven't gone up in over 30 years in the aggregate when accounted for inflation, it tells you that that is true. Because the wealthy have, in fact, every year gotten wealthier, but the middle class hasn't. We continue to take. And that is how you do it. You can get 7% growth or more out of a 3.5% growing economy. And most of the time it was like a 2% growing economy, only if you spread out the pain on everybody else as they extract for themselves. It's not hard to understand once you look at the numbers. Once you look at a fixed economy growing at 3.5%, but the wealthy part, the pie, for them are growing bigger, that means it's taken away from you. Folks, it's so important for you to understand that, but not only for you to understand it, for you to reveal that to other people. Because it is not the individual politician's fault. It is not the voters' fault. It is not that folks don't want to work hard. Now, people are working 2-3 jobs right now. Many are, 20% or so. It is an economic crisis created by the design of the economy. that is what has failed. The design of this economy is wrong. All right, let me continue with the blog of the week. Anyhow, the masses have the plutocracy petrified. They understand because they understand the game, meaning the plutocracy understands the game. The wards of the plutocracy, meaning the mainstream media, the pundits, and some corporatist politicians are trying to spin that because not all of the insurgent candidates won, that somehow it is a progressive failure. The narrative is false and without merit. Daily Kos D'Artagnan's article does a great job of explaining the fallacy away regarding the Michigan race between an establishment, in quotes, candidate and the insurgent. And I definitely put that establishment candidate in quotes because let's see how establishment that candidate was. This is what D'Artagnan said. But Ian Millhiser, the chief legal analyst and justice editor for Think Progress, points out that this line of thinking is, for the most part, a load of hogwash. Using Michigan's Gretchen Whitmer as an example, he demonstrates how far the left has come in moving the goalposts, or known as the Overton window, if you prefer, to embrace the progressive agenda. And I'm telling you this, I was one of Bernie Sanders' delegates in Philly. And I can tell you from personal experience, we moved that platform all the way to the left. We moved that platform, made it the most progressive platform the Democratic Party has ever seen. So notice whenever we talk about, what all Democrats need to do is we don't have to rail against the establishment. We just have to say, Democrats, could you just live up to the platform that we wrote and we all voted on? Anyway, a quick look at Whitmer's website vividly illustrates just how much things have changed in the last 5 years. She supports Medicaid expansion throughout the state, boosting teachers' salaries, more funding to Planned Parenthood, expansion of healthcare services to poor and rural Michigan residents, eliminating oil pipelines in the Great Lakes, ending Citizens United legalizing marijuana for recreational use, which she touted at Ann Arbor's Hash Bash, expanding civil rights legislation to cover transgender citizens, disallowing so-called religious freedom legislation that allows bullying of children, legislation against bullying, banning job discrimination against felons, and a multitude of pro-urban policies designed to assist lower-income people, universal preschool, consent education in public schools to end sexual harassment, and much more. That is your establishment candidate. Yes, she did run against Abul El Sayed, who received support from Bernie Sanders. But why would they go for Sayed, given that they know Whitmers and that she's saying, oh my God, I've served before and I'm going to do these things. This is my platform. That made the option of Sayed winning that much more difficult, because there's a known entity, and not only that, a woman. And I'll be blunt with you. I want that Congress lambasted, filled up with women. I want women all over that place, that you can't have these congressmen making the stupid statements they constantly make when they see the women in the elevators, like many of them have had to endure. I want to see at least a 50-50, but preferably there should be more women in Congress than men. Why? Because there are more women in the country, period. Right? Come on now. Let's be real. So, finishing the blog, or coming close to the end of the blog, or pretty close, that is. The reality is that progressives started moving the Democratic Party away from Bill Clinton's DLC triangulation back to where it belongs. Bernie Sanders began the process with the platform negotiations that resulted in the most progressive Democratic platform likely ever. A few months ago, I wrote the article titled Reinjecting the Democratic Party with its Progressive Soul Before It's Too Late, where I pointed out the following, and I said the following. Here is the reality. And folks, I need you to listen to this, because this is going to shock a whole lot of people. For those of you who didn't read this, this was on the front page of the Daily Kos as well as at egbertowillies.com. But hear this. This is important, and I need you to listen to this well. And I'm going to read it through without interruptions, because I want to get the flow of this. But this is important. Here is the reality. Bill Clinton won 50%, or rather, Bill Clinton never won 50% of the popular vote with his center-right shift. Presently, President Obama, with his left turn, won over 50% in each run, even with the headwinds of racism and a determined plutocracy. When one asks Americans the policies they want without specifying if they are progressive policies, it always turns out that they want them. So what is the Democratic Party's problem with embracing them, with running the appropriate candidates? The answer is simple. Many in the leadership have been bought out by the plutocracy. Sects within the Democratic Party are just the boundary, the left rail of the train tracks moving in the same direction, the direction those that control the economy wants it to go. The result of this reality is that there is not much distinction in many, not all, of the policies out of Washington. You see, the Democratic and Republican establishments play the good cop, bad cop game. Why is that important for the plutocracy? The Democratic Party has become the pacifier for the masses. The Republicans propose policies so bad that terrible Democratic compromise seems like a good deal. It is all a game, and once understood, it is something we can do something about now. The 2018 election must be instrumental in breaking that paradigm, and there must be no compromising. Only real progressive candidates must make it through the primaries. We can worry about district-specific narratives after the primaries. Americans must not be distracted by fallacies that state one must elect candidates that are right of center because their district is right of center. Economically, no poor or middle class area is right of center. But here's the bigger piece, my dear brothers and sisters. Here's the bigger piece. Most people are either poor or middle class. So therefore, nobody, the vast majority of Americans, over 90% of Americans, could not possibly want rightward policies. Now, what the other side does a lot is they bring in social issues, they bring in racial issues, they bring all these things. And what these things do is have people fighting with things that are inconsequential to their personal economies, inconsequential to the money that they're going to spend, inconsequential to the education their kids are going to get, inconsequential to how they feed their kids, inconsequential to what's going to be there for their retirements. You see? So, if the vast majority, over 90% of the country is middle class or poor, and you don't have policies that support them, then you fight about junk. You do what Donald Trump is doing. You create racial issues and you create all these things that people sit back and fight about. And then you have a willing media that blows it out of proportion, you know, because look, right now the big thing is the racial march that's going to happen either tomorrow or sometime this weekend, right? That is getting a lot of news. Why? It's going to be in some little town or whatever. Let them march. Ignore them. That's not an issue. Let them march with their swastikas and all these. Look, let me tell you something, folks. I have friends that are bona fide racists. Some of them know they are. Some don't know that they are. For those that don't know that they are, I usually have conversations with them and subtly work with them. For those that know that they are but are just happy with it, well, that's just life. That's just life. But sitting down and fighting about it and what this is going to do or that, it makes no sense. Either whether you're racist or not, it makes no sense. You're still the one getting hurt. You know, people say, Berto, how comes you have so many friends that are racist? Psst. You know, because you know what? The only way I can change them is actually being a friend with them, you know? It's the only way I can make a difference. That's the only way I can make a difference. I can't make a difference. I can't change a person that is perfect. I can change a person that's doing the things the way they should. I can't. They're already good. So I can't do a damn thing about it. But I can do a hell of a lot about persons with racial proclivities, racist proclivities, with sexist proclivities. Sorry, I'm still getting over my cold. I can still do things about the sexist, the racist, the homophobe, all of that. I can do something about it. And the best way to do something about it is not being an enemy of that person, is being somebody that's willing to talk to you. And eventually being willing to be honest with you and saying, yes, I really have these deficiencies and I really have this. And you'd be surprised how many folks come to me and tell me, yeah, I know I am a racist and I'm trying to see how I can get over this, but that is just how I grew up. When you have folks that have that kind of, I can work with somebody that does that. Because I came from Panama, where I had a whole lot of these as a Latino, a black Latino, a Caribbean black Latino. I know all the things that that means. You know? I know all the things that means. You know, I had a whole lot of the same prejudices that other Caribbean folk have, that other Latinos have, that other black folk had. And I had to extricate that from my system. So far now that it's not only from the head, but from the heart as well. But I'm telling you, folks, I'm telling you, we can allow them to use all those issues. We cannot allow them to use all those issues to stop us from doing what we have to do. And that is to make this economy an economy that works for everybody. Because right now what they're doing is they have an economy that works for very few. And there's this big argument. Is it about class? Is it about race? Is it about... Look, it is nice to have those intellectual discussions. It is okay to have those intellectual discussions. But they do not do a damn thing to solve the people's problems in those trailer homes in Appalachia, those trailer homes in the barrios, and those trailer homes in the ghettos. Does nothing. Nobody's asking anybody to love anybody, but we sure as hell should be able to expect an economy that works for everybody. You know, I leave a lot of the personal stuff out and what you like or don't like or your preferences and all. I don't care about that. What I care about is that we live in a country where all of us have equal access to success. And I'm telling you something, for those of for the few people, for the percentage of people that think equal access to success is not right, that some should have more access to success than the other, they're the minority, or we make them the minority, and we keep trucking. We keep moving forward. We got to do it. But we can't allow the Trumps of the world. And again, you know, everybody wants to blame Trump. It's not all about Trump. All these things have been festering way before Trump. Trump just gave it a bullhorn. Trump just gave it a bullhorn. But none of this stuff is new. Trump just gave it a bullhorn. So let's remember that. Let's not sit down there and blame Trump. You know, Trump is just Trump. Let me finish the blog. And it's the last paragraph. I spent 4 days at Netroots Nation 2018. That was last week in New Orleans. It was a great, it was the most attended Netroots Nation 2018 ever. For those who don't know what Netroots is, it's where all the progressive bloggers and politicians, all the progressive bloggers and writers and all of that get together at Netroots. Over 3,000 of us, okay? And all the politicians show up because we write. We write a lot. The blogosphere, Google, and all these things get populated with the things we write. So they want to come there to get good mention. They want to come there to say, we were here. So when you go ahead and you index, or you go ahead and search for Cory Booker. Oh yeah, Cory Booker was at Netroots, all right. I was supposed to grab him for an interview, but Juliana Forlano got him before I did. I did get Cynthia Nixon, though, the woman who's running for governor, who used to be the star of one of the stars of Sex and the City. So I have that video on my blog, egbertowillies.com. But anyhow, folks, look. Let me go ahead and close the blog out. I spent 4 days at Netroots Nation 2018. Every candidate, from the likes of Tim Ryan, and you know Tim Ryan is that congressman that likes to play like he's centered. He's so centered. He wants to listen to both sides. Now, I listen to both sides, but I'm as left as you go. You don't have to give up your values to listen to everybody and to give everybody an opportunity to convince you of something that they want. You don't have to give up your values to do that. But some of our Democrats, a lot of our corporate Democrats, a lot of our establishment Democrats, that's exactly what they do. And that is where I that is where I pretty much had Tim Ryan pegged. But Tim Ryan went on the not on the plenary. He actually gave a speech at Netroots Nation that could have been given by Bernie Sanders. So when they talk about the progressive stop or the progressive movement being stopped, look, from the likes of Tim Ryan to Kamala Harris to Cory Booker, they all sounded more like Bernie Sanders than like any centrist here. Here is the reality. Young progressives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the future of the Democratic Party, if it will continue to exist. Those progressives are the future of the party, because America cannot survive unless those policies come to fruition. Why? The extraction is at proportions now that it's not only affecting the other. The extraction by our economy is now affecting a large majority. I was going to say plurality, but a large majority of the country. Only progressivism is going to solve that problem. Only some form of redistribution, however you want to call it, but it will be redistribution, because the economy, our economic system has a flaw, a serious flaw. Capitalism is defined as the efficient allocation of resources. The fact that a stockbroker makes more than a teacher tells you that there's nothing efficient about the allocation of resources. The fact that a tweet, and I talked about that yesterday, the fact that a tweet from the owner, from the president, the CEO of Tesla, can actually lose a short seller. There shouldn't even be short sellers, all right? But $1.3 billion in a few hours shows you the fragility of what we're built on. Everybody wants you to believe, oh, these guys are scientists. These guys know what they're talking. No, they're not. If you were to ask a physicist or a chemist or any engineer to do the calculations on an economy and see if it's self-sustaining, immediately they will tell you the American economy is not self-sustaining. We have to grab and eat to maintain the growth. What keeps the stock market alive? We have to continue to extract. We have to extract either locally, meaning from all you folks that are listening to me right now, or internationally. Well, we've continued to extract internationally, but as other countries gain more status, it's not as easy to extract from them. And again, the otherness is getting away from us. And that is why, folks, we have to learn the basics of economics so that when progressives come out with not their theories but their solutions, that we don't allow the other side. Like right now, if you take a look at what the right is going crazy. And why is the right going crazy right now? Because Ocasio-Cortez is starting to ring a bell when she says, why can other countries do it and we can't? Why? We are America. Why can't we do it? Other countries are doing it, aren't they? So why can't we? When she tells that story resonates. And when that story resonates, people start to ask questions. And when people start to ask questions, they start to vote accordingly. They start to vote to that person that gives them the answers. People were saying, well, look, Ocasio-Cortez won with such a small percentage of her district. Have you ever asked yourself why? Well, all those people that just couldn't see themselves voting for a democratic socialist stayed home, but they did know who they weren't going to vote for, and that was the status quo. Folks, understand what you are not being told. Understand what we must learn. Understand how things really are. That is what progressive media is all about. That is what we do. Folks, please go ahead and share this on your different sites. It's so important. And also, I want to ask you before I'm going to go to the questions right now, but I want to do a quick thing to say, folks that are listening to me right now, please go to patreon.com/politics done right. That's patreon.com/politics done right. Unless we get your support, unless we get your subscription, unless we are able to do this. And folks that are listening right now, if you can't do it, please share that link. Allow folks to tell folks about this progressive program. Let other people know. Don't only keep it for yourself. Let other people know that there's somebody out there telling the truth. There's somebody out there that is informing you. And by the way, for all those detractors, that even those that are on this board right now that think, oh, I'm not telling the truth, I ask every single person to research everything that I've ever said. Please do. I want you to fact check everything that I said. And to tell you why. First of all, I can tell you that the vast majority of everything that I say is accurate, and for where I may have stumbled, I would immediately correct if found. So, I mean, I've never had a problem with people fact checking me. Okay, here we go with the comments, and I'm going to go with you. But again, folks, please go to patreon.com/politics done right. Okay, Michael Rudnin. Oh, hey, the comment section is working normally again. Yes, I'm so happy for that. Lisa Hollister, welcome aboard. Hello from Washington State. Love to have you here, my friend. Michael Rudnin, Secular Talk Radio, the Kyle Calista Show often made the same point, so no such thing as the liberal media. Thank you so kindly for telling me that. Michael Rudnin, chain migration is a net good. Absolutely so, and we can prove it. In fact, I have a person that is coming to that is going to write a blog for us. He's a right-wing Trumpist that really sees the necessity for us having immigration. Daniel Ledo, laughing out loudly, I hear Egberto has taken up the lie about many people having 3 jobs. It's not a lie that there are 20% of Americans who work in more than 1 job. It's not a lie. Look it up. What it is, when they try to hurt Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is that she kind of said everybody's working 2 jobs. No, it's not. I think 20% is what is the amount of people that are working several jobs. Okay, Michael Renner, corporate news gives us puff pieces. That is true. Hey, Stuart Snow from KPFT, welcome aboard, my brother. I consider WAPO to be center left. They usually favor the Democratic establishment. True. And I don't, but here's a problem, my dear friend Rudnin. I don't consider the Democratic establishment center left. I consider it center right, not even center. Obama tried to bring them to the center. Obama wasn't even to the left. Obama brought them to the center. If you take a look at Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act was not a left-wing product. It was a product, it was a capitalist product dependent on insurance companies who make a profit on the pains of people. That was the compromise he made to keep insurance companies solvent, something that they have no right to be in an economic system where it comes to healthcare. In a healthcare device, in healthcare, it's an expense. Profit in healthcare is an expense. Okay, Rene Perpetua. Patreon has great informative progressive commentators. Yes, they do. And please, folks, go ahead and go to patreon.com. And for all of you that are listening, please go ahead and share that. Share my link, my Patreon link for Politics Done Right, and encourage others to go ahead and join up. It is so important for us to get this. I need to get about, to be real, about 2,000 people to keep this going, being able to leave the state, all that kind of stuff. Right now, I've been doing it on my retirement. I'm going to tell you guys straight up. My retirement has been disappearing, and it's pretty close to being gone, because I have faith that we in the long run, progressive is going to support folks who are out there hitting the pavement for them. I wouldn't have given up my company otherwise. Okay, continuing. You have to read and listen extensively. Yes, absolutely true. To get some facsimile of truth. Yes, and that's why we have Politics Done Right. I hope to make that a bit easier. Rene Perpetua, but she is current and gets much info quickly. All right. Michael Rednan, progressives want a new Congress. All right. We want to get every corrupt establishment politician who accepts corporate donations. Yes, absolutely so. All right. Rene Perpetua, the minimum wage is $7.25. Can you believe that that's a poverty wage? Unlawful. Let's say people bankrupt by healthcare, unacceptable and still occurring. College, unaffordable and it's still unaffordable. And those are parts of the 5 points I said Democrats should always have on their tongue when they're ready to explain. Let's say Rene Perpetua, the crooks must be voted out. We will do that, Rene. Let's make sure to keep up doing. I'm with you, Egberto, at least 50-50 in Congress. Absolutely. We need 50% women in Congress. You could write an informative blog just to get the truth out, Michael. Let's see, Egberto, if you count the eligible citizens, including non-voters, none of the politicians in modern American history earned 50% of the vote. You're actually right. Mike Cisak, those people know that far left-wing policies are destructive to the people and the economy. Prove that. Egberto, I still talk to you even though you are a racist. Wow, I am a racist. I tell you what, for all any one of my white compatriots that are listening right now, my Latino compatriots, my black compatriots, my Asian compatriots, please have a word with Mike Cisak. He just said Egberto Willies is a racist, but he's my friend. And by the way, Mike, I consider you a friend as well. But no, Mike, I'm not. But you can try. You can try to make it that way, but I'm not. There are 5 economic classes. I can't read it right now. René Hervé is one of the most enlightened commentators I know. Thank you so kindly for that. You must think so too, Cisak, since you're always here. Brother Cisak is here. And look, Brother Cisak, I want to thank you for being here. And Michael Ledo, all you conservatives that show up, you know I love you. You know I'm going to change you one of these days. Keep listening and keep calling, and we're going to talk. When you come into town, Cisak, don't forget you're supposed to go and have some coffee with me. Maybe I'll do something with you then and be able to get to your mind when I talk to you face to face, Brother Cisak. All right, René Ferfatua says, yes, discuss the issues and we don't call each other names. You know, I don't get into that. You know, I will call politicians heavy names and I'll call politicians out, you know, the people. But my brothers and sisters, whether they're Republican, Democrats or whatever, that's what I consider you, brothers and sisters, right? You know, you don't all think the same. Hell, I have one of my sisters that's a Republican, not only a Republican, a right-wing Republican evangelical. I love her to death. Okay? Anyhow, folks, I'm going to have to close the show here. I'm going a little bit late. Joanne Chenoweth, welcome aboard. Thank you for coming in. In the 60s, the top tax rate was 60% and all votes were rising. I agree with you. But that requires a larger topic of discussion, so we'll do that a little later. So what I'm going to do right now is ask you once again, folks, to please go to patreon.com, patreon.com/politics done right. Very important that we go ahead and support progressive media. I do the same. I promise you that I do the same with all the different rags in there. Daily Kos, opednews.com, democraticunderground.com, coffeepartyusa.com, the Democratic Party here in town. I make sure and put my money where my mouth is as well, because it is important for us to support all these progressive, especially the independent progressive networks that are out there informing our people, like what I'm doing here. I mean, because these are things I guarantee you won't hear this narrative on TV. And because you don't hear this narrative on TV, a lot of people vote incorrectly. So folks, stick with me. Stick with me. Stick with me. I promise you to give you truth. I promise you to continue to enlighten. I promise you that what we are going to do what we are doing is not out of spite. It's not out of anything other than this is what has to be done if we're going to maintain the middle class, if we're going to maintain the poor. But you know how I end this baby. I'm going to tell you, my name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And guess what? I am what? Out.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.
1, 2, 3, 4.